Welcome to Whisky.com, where fine spirits meet. My name is Luening, Horst Luening. I'm the master taster of Whisky.com, and today we have the frequently asked questions, part 5. And as always, if you would like to ask something, then please put your questions somewhere in our forum, in our vlog, and add a hashtag Whisky.com, and then I will look through all the social media and find your questions, and then I will select some. And well, today we have 3 of them, as always, or as most often. And the first one is fine dust is an ecological danger. How about peat smoke in our whiskey? Is this a danger? Inhaling dust, so particles in the air, is quite dangerous. Yes. There are studies inside the European community that said that the population might get 7% older if we would reduce the fine dust to 0. So there are limits to fine dust levels, and well, in a few places we are above those limits, and well, the limits tend to be stronger every year. So smoke means we have particles in the air. That's the definition of smoke. Typically you say haze or dust. And in contrast, vapor is drops, liquid drops in the air. This is typically called fog. So there's a difference between fog and haze. Fog means water in the air, and haze means dust, fine dust in the air. So a pot of tea water, if you heat it, then you see vapor rising, water drops in the air. But if you smoke a cigarette, then you have smoke particles in the air, and whoever complains about fine dust, stop smoking. That's most of the fine dust a smoker inhales most of the fine dust from his cigarette and not from the environment. During the production of whiskey, peat means smoke. You cut peat in the mosses, and these peat tend to have a humidity inside. It will not dry completely, so if you light a fire with that peat, you have dust, peat dust, together with water drops, with damp, and this cold, smoky damp is what makes our whiskey peaty, smoky, because the fine dust from the smoke lies on the barley in the end, and then the barley is put into the mash tun, and then those small dust particles, peat combustion particles, go into solution in the liquid, and they are gone. So in your whiskey you do not have any fine dust, but you have the chemical compounds resulting from the combustion. In former times, the stills were heated with coal, and you have those huge chimneys at the distilleries. There are some chimneys from bricks, like Lagavulin, and others have modern stainless steel chimneys, or with those black toppings, so that you can't see those black marks from the dust. Today, the hot air for heating the wash in the stills is heated with oil or with natural gas. So Scotland is close to the North Sea with its oil fields and gas fields. Macallan heats with gas, natural gas. And I've seen several distilleries in former times with coal. So at Glenfiddich, I've seen coal, at Ardmore, at Glendronach. And when Glendronach was reopened in 2002, well, they had to change from the coal firing to, I think, oil firing, because EC regulations said if you have a heating with a higher power than a megawatt, then your fine dust level at the top of the chimney is limited to XYZ. And this isn't feasible with coal firing without extremely expensive filtering. So they stopped the traditional coal and switched over to other fossil fuels for heating. And there are very, very few distilleries out there which are green. I also have seen coal at some maltings. So at Benriach, I've seen some coal lying around. So if you heat the air for drying the barley with peat, then it's very smoky. And if you heat it with coal, then, well, there is some residual of the coal in the corn or on the barley, but it's far less smoky than the heating with peat. Modern drum maltings, they use a closed pipe system for bringing the hot smoke to the malted barley during the drying process. And this hinders the fine dust to pollute the surroundings of the malting facility in the malting plant. And the second thing is that your yield is much better, that you need less and less peat for drying or for putting the smoky aroma on the barley in the malting drums. So the process is very, very efficient, and it's not true that the Scots are harvesting more peat than it grows in the same time. No, that was true, probably true in former times when everybody used the peat for heating of his cottage. So it was the main power source for heating the buildings in Scotland, because coal from England was very, very expensive, and so they dug their peat themselves. They cut the peat, dried them on the fields, on the mosses, and then brought it back and heated their houses and heated the stills and dried the barley. Everything was done by peat, and so the air and the surrounding was covered by smoke and fine dust and stinking everywhere. So today, if you pass a distillery with maltings, there are a few there, like Lefroy or Beaumont, then you're able to smell the peat smoke, and this means you inhale the fine dust of that distillery. But they have such a small firing in there that the limits of the megawatts where the regulation cut in are not reached. So, but if you're living close to a distillery and the wind is always blowing in your direction and you always have this smoke in the nose, I would say it isn't good for your health. No. The other question is the phenols, which bring the peaty aroma in the whiskies, are they toxic? Well, phenols are very toxic in high quantities. So the the hospitals use them for cleaning and disinfection. So there are some whiskies out there which have a smell from hospital. Yeah. Don't worry. Be happy. The peat levels are so small, the phenol levels, because most of the phenols stay in the pot ale after distillation, and only a very, very small part goes over in the finished product. And that is further oxidizing over the years of maturation. So the level of phenols in a whiskey is orders of magnitude smaller than in, well, say, a piece of smoked salmon, or put your sausages on a grill, on a charcoal grill. You're a factor of thousands, of tens of thousands higher than in whiskey. So if you try to reach those levels, the alcohol will harm you more. So fine dust has nothing to do with whiskey. Which distillery shall I visit during my stay in Scotland? There are lots of distilleries in Scotland with visitor centers, and I'm afraid I'm not able to visit all those 95 working distilleries every year. So my knowledge about the all-opening visitor centers like mushrooms in autumn is limited. And what I found wonderful to visit in the past was Glenfiddich. Glenfiddich is a big distillery and has a lot of small stills, and those rows of small stills, they look magnificent, wonderful. And then there are those two mash tuns, one of Victorian ages, open, where you can see the equipment turning the mash, wonderful. And you're able to see a bottling line, a modern bottling line, where whiskey is put into the bottle and in the cases and then stapled on pallet. So you see the whole process of whiskey making. And if you're not a native English speaker, they have guides in the holiday seasons from different countries, so that you might have a tour in Danish, or in French. And besides Glenfiddich is Balvenie, and Balvenie has a malting floor. So there are not often visits or tours inside the Balvenie distillery, but if you're able, or if you have a chance to go there, do it. It's worth a visit. Macallan was also very, very good. They also have 27 stills in the moment, and a second still house, and a third distillery is built. So, and those stills are not built in rows, exact rows like at Glenfiddich, but they are built in several groups on different levels, and everywhere is glass, a glass front. So we have wonderful views through those stills. Really good. Have a look at our whiskey database. There you find pictures of most of those distilleries. I think 95% of those distilleries we have pictures from taking ourselves, and there's roughly a dozen pictures of every distillery available. From some distilleries there are also videos where we visited the distillery and took our videos during the tours. So you can have a look at those distilleries and decide which one you would like to see in reality. At Macallan, you're also able to have a look inside warehouses. This is not often possible, and from time to time they have glass walls to the duty-free warehouses, which are typically locked, so you have a look inside. But at Macallan, we were able to enter the warehouses and smell the damp of the maturing whiskey. Oh, the angel's share. Wonderful. Northern Highlands, Dalmore was very excellent, and there you have the chance to see a Lomond still. That means the tall neck of the still is covered by a second water housing, which increases the redistillation rate. So Lomond Still at Dalmore and just the neighbouring Glenmorangie distillery has the tallest stills in Scotland, 10 in a cathedral-like still house, 6 meters, 18 feet high, very impressive. Glenmorangie also had a very good guide, but that changes from time to time, so you can't be sure that the guide is as good as somebody told you. In the lowlands, there's Glenkinchie with a museum, how whiskey was made in former times with old equipment and an old fire brigade truck. On the other hand, Glenkinchie looks not as a lowland distillery with 3 stills, but only 2 stills, and looks like really a normal Highland distillery. Springbank on the peninsula of Kintyre is a distillery for experts, because every step of the production is done by hand as it was in former times. So there is a storage of malts, of grains, of barley, and then there's the steeping. You steep the barley in water, so it sucks with water, and then you see the maltings and the kiln, and every step is done by hand. Therefore, the whiskey of Springbank is always 10 euros, dollars, pounds more expensive than other whiskey, because everything is done by hand, just down to the production and the filling of bottles. I was able to have looks in the old Danish warehouses as well as in direct warehouses. So it's very, very interesting for an experienced visitor, because you can see differences to the typical modern time distillery. And on Islay, every distillery is wonderful. They are used to have tourists there, so they are prepared. Probably not the Bunnahabhain, because it's a little far in the north, but the rest of the distilleries, they are used to visitors. And I also got at Bunnahabhain a wonderful tour. No question about that. I got everywhere VIP tours, so I can't tell you if the normal tour is as good as my VIP tour was. Lafroig and Beaumont have malting floors, still malting floors. And at Lafroig I got a tour with the old distillery manager Ian Henderson. It was a wonderful tour. And at Beaumont you're always brought through the vaults number 1, the warehouse which lies below sea level. The wall is wet and dropping water from the wall, and it's damp, it's dark, the ceiling is low, and if you suffer from claustrophobia, don't go in there. The big 4 stills of Lagavulin, very impressive in that small still house. And if you visit Kalila, the view from the still house with this big window facing the sea, and the Paps of Jura on the other side. So if there's good weather and the sun is shining on the Paps of Jura, there's a wonderful view from the pot stills of Kalila to the Paps of Jura. Wonderful. Isle of Arran, I had you can see a video tour from me here. It lies picturesquely in the landscape, and everything is close together, so the tour shows you everything. There's a multimedia available as it is on the Orkneys with Highland Park. They have several malting floors there, so quite a lot of their malt is produced on site, and multimedia as well. And Talisker, they had a very unexperienced guide. I heard that a second time, so hopefully the distillery heard that too, and they changed the level of the experience of the guide. Most of the distilleries in Scotland are worth a visit, really. And if you ask friendly and fold your hands behind your back and move slowly, stay away from the equipment, then most of the employees will show you around. And then, if he has time, most of them have time, they give you a nice talk and talk about the specialties of the distillery and everything. So also distilleries without an official tour, you have the chance to talk to them and to find your personally favorite distillery in the landscape somewhere. Yeah, have a look. As I said, in our whiskey database there are thousands, if not tens of thousands, pictures of the Scottish distilleries there, and a growing number of videos. This is for the visit, plan it for next year, for summer. And the last question is, what is virgin oak? Virgin oak. A virgin oak cask is a cask which never held any liquid before. So it was built, toasted, flamed, completely prepared, and then the first filling is whiskey. Then it's called a virgin cask, a virgin oak. What does that mean? It means that the first strong oaky aromas are still present in that cask. If you have an ex-bourbon cask and you fill in bourbon, then the bourbon sucks out the extreme oaky aromas and the level goes down and down and down, and then you switch over to Scotch and then only very few oaky aromas move over into the whiskey over the years. And if you fill your raw whiskey into a fresh virgin cask, then you get all these big aromas into your Scotch. Well, typically those whiskies are very young if you bottle them, because this intense oaky aroma is not pairing that good with the whiskey, with the Scotch whiskey. It's pairing better with the bourbon. And also the bourbon industry typically stays to 4 years of maturation. And law says 2 years is enough. In Scotland, at least 3 years. So typically those virgin casks are used for finishing. So you have a 3 times used cask called a fourth fill, if you would add the fourth filling in it. And this is very, very weak. So you won't find a big oak deal in that whiskey. But the whiskey matures over the years and loses the fainty, strong aromas through subtraction, maturation. But it does not add oaky aromas in it. And then you do a finishing in a virgin oak and put all those missing oaky aromas into the whiskey. So therefore, virgin oak casks are used most often, because then those oaky aromas add up to a full matured whiskey. Well, you can smell differences, but in the first guess, it's quite a good whiskey. There's a second sort of cask which fall in this virgin oak category, and this is rejuvenated casks. That means you have a used cask, and then you have a machine with a steel brush in it, and then you take out all those old leftovers from the charcoal until the bare oak wall is visible again. I've seen that already. Yes. And then you toast the cask again, because in the first step, the toasting just activated half of the stave. The outside half, is still as it was 30 years ago. And then you take out the inside of the cask, a little thinner, and you activate not the complete rest of the stave, but up to 2/3 or 80% of the stave. And then you flame it again from the inside to get this charcoal layer. And then this rejuvenated cask acts very closely to a virgin oak cask. You have to be a little bit more careful with the cask, because the thickness of the staves is thinner, and you can't drop it from a meter high to the bottom and expect to be in full intact. So this is rejuvenated casks, and they are used more and more often in the Scotch whisky industry because they have so many of them. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. There's more to come. And if you would like to ask questions for one of our next videos, then please add your questions to our social media, to our forum, to our vlog on Whisky.com, and add a hashtag Whisky.com to this question, and I will happily look over your questions and try to answer as good as I can. Thank you for watching.